Yo, what's up, family? What's up, family? Can you guys hear me? If you're watching, welcome to the well. And if you're on with us, let me know that you can hear me because I can't hear myself. Perfect. I can see the Bridget. I know you're on, Bridget. And can you hear me as well? If you are, welcome to the well. Welcome to the well. Can you guys hear me? Perfect. All right. Awesome. There go the answers. Listen, welcome to the well, guys. I just wanted to make sure. Welcome to the well encounter. This is we are bringing you the well live for the first time from our own well streaming platform. So we appreciate you all being here with us. And listen, while you're here, drop your name in the chat. Let us know you're watching. Take a moment and share this post this on your page if you're watching from Facebook. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and share the link. Let people know that you're on. Wherever you are, take a moment, pause, copy and paste it and text it and send it out to your network and let them know that you are watching the well with us. I see just a few folks are on, and I want to say hi to all of our Wellians. Listen, my name is Pastor Ramon, aka Pastor Ray, and I'm so glad to be with you on this evening. This is the Well Live Encounter, and we have a motto here at the Well. The motto here at the Well is encounter the well, become the well, emerge and share the well. That's right, encounter the well, become the well, emerge and share the well. And we believe that everything that we do here on the well, when you're in a part of the well community, should lead you down a path. We don't just do this and we form our community for no reason. We form our community because we believe there's a path that God has you on. That path is the path to the 5 P's. What are those 5 P's? I'm so glad you asked. Promise, your peace, your passion, your purpose, and your power. Everything that we do should lead you down that path. And we hope that you find that path as you're a part of our community. Listen, and if you want to be a part of our community, listen, you can be a part of our community just simply by letting us know that you want to be a part of the community. So we'll invite you to engage with us in all of the ways that you see there at Encounter the Well, both on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. Across the board, it's Encounter the Well. So follow us, like the pages, and engage with us. All right. Listen, this evening, we are really happy to be bringing the third part of our series to you, The State of the Well, Guns, Gangs, and God. Maybe it was gangs, guns, God. Gangs, guns, God. And we've defined gangs and guns over the last couple of weeks, and we want to talk tonight a little bit about God. How do we respond? How do we see God responding to, and how do we take on the mantle that God has asked us to take on and respond to gangs and guns? All right. So this evening we have a great panel with us. So I'm going to ask super producer Brennan to bring us in and let us talk about God.
What's up, folks? Matt, I think you're muted. Reverend Dent, you're muted as well.
Hey,
Ah,
everybody.
everybody's
Hey, good
here.
evening. What's going
Hey
on?
everyone.
Brendan got us
What's up,
popping.
everybody? Y'all looking beautiful. Y'all looking crisp. Look at that, Matt. I don't know. I think you got a little bit of dinner in your beard over there on the left hand side, man. I don't know.
it's it's the Greys, and thanks for pointing them out.
Oh, okay. My bad.
Loving the setup this evening. It looks real nice.
Yeah, nice
Appreciate it.
and crisp.
Appreciate it.
Real crisp.
You've been working some
You know,
magic, Brennan.
sometimes you get thrown curveballs and you just gotta, you roll with the punches. And when you're rolling with the punches, you got to counter punch. And the counter punch is usually better than the first punch. So, hey. Nah, I appreciate it, man. I'm so happy to be able to help build the platform in this way, and just to help to get our message out in a more clear way, and then also being able to do it from some of our own platforms. We definitely appreciate, and it's all love with the Amplified Network. They were going through some changes, so it kind of forced us to have to change. Because this message still needs to go out. We still need to talk to the folks, and we didn't want that to stop. So we appreciate y'all for one rescheduling. This is round 2 of trying to get this one done. We're gonna get it done tonight, though. We're gonna get it done tonight. Tonight is the night. But definitely appreciate y'all for joining us tonight. Let's start out with just a little bit of intros. Ladies first. Let's start with Reverend Dent.
Ready, set, go. I was hoping you were going to say that. Good evening. My name is Reverend Sheila Dent. I'm an associate minister at the First Baptist Church of Highland Park. And I am so glad to be here this evening to talk with you all about gangs, guns, and most importantly, God.
All right. We can go ahead and go on to the right of her.
Hey everyone, I'm Matt Collington. I, along with my wife, run the Wells Justice Ministry, and when I'm not doing that, I teach at American University and work on some research projects on racial inequalities in the justice system. And I apologize that Anna Josie is not here. She is not feeling well tonight, but she is very sorry to miss you all and has to send me.
I guess you'll do. I guess you'll do. Mr. Biggs.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Johnny Biggs here. Name is Jonathan Gant, but I go by Johnny Biggs. Vice President of Vision Quest and Vice President of Johnny Biggs Entertainment, a small production company. We do movies, cooking shows, literacy, do a few things. Deacon at my home church, Shiloh Abundant Life Center in Forestville. So I'm just happy to be a part of this. I'm just good. I'm glad to be here.
Sweet.
All right, I can go next. It's your boy B. Black at it again, black at it to win. Happy to be back in the space with the people. Listen, man, this is a long-awaited conversation. Y'all missed a whole lot because we was talking, but y'all wasn't hearing it. But we gonna run it back, and we gonna get it back together, and we gonna have them same points and get that same fire to y'all. But last but not least, Pastor Ray.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Listen, so I don't know if you guys, it looked like you guys could hear me in the beginning, but if you didn't, Pastor Ray, pass it to the well, and just happy to have everybody on. Thanks, Brennan, for not only taking us on tonight and leading us in my absence and quietness and malfunctions with technology. But listen, Jackie says hello too. She's in the chat. Hey, Jackie, thanks for watching tonight. But I just want to give a shout out to Brennan he's our director of marketing here at the Well, and Brennan has been doing a lot of behind the scenes work to make sure that we were set up for this month. I know he's already said some stuff for Amplify Network. Again, I just want to echo that and say, Amplify, we love you. We thank you for the time that we've had with you. And as you can see, Jackie's on with us. So it's no hard feelings. Ain't no beef. I don't want the rumors to start.
We're gonna cut all that out early.
You know what I'm saying? Let me just cut it all off. We at the Well and Amplify Network are still in partnership, and we still love them, and they still have love for us. So y'all can go ahead, can it, if you wanted to start a rumor. We are good, and we love them, and we'll be doing some more work at some point in the future, doing some major things together. So shout out to both Terrence and Jackie and everybody over at Amplify Network. Brendan is right. We started this conversation, and it was getting amazing. And I believe that we're going to bring the fire tonight. I know that folks have been hitting me up. Is the Well coming on? Is the Well going to be live? Is the Well doing his thing? And so, yes, we are. We started with this question last week, and I'd like to pick up there. if you remember, Reverend Mother Dent, the question was, why does God let bad things happen? Why do you think God allows bad things to happen? And I'm just going to let y'all go ahead and jump on in this conversation. I started a little bit with Reverend Mama Dent, so I'm going to just stay there. Mama Dent, why does that? If y'all don't know, Mama Dent is a mother to the Wellians. She's a mother to the squad. So we're going to start off with the mother tonight. Mama, why do you think that God allows bad things to happen?
God allows bad things to happen, and I'll say bottom line is free will. Bad things were happening in the garden. Adam and Eve stepped to the left when God said step to the right. And so as a direct result, bad things happen. And that is my position on that matter. And if anybody has an argument with it, take it up with God.
So she chose violence today, huh?
I came out with the guns a-blazing.
Listen, that was our second conversation. Guns, gangs, guns. You bought the guns.
So she on the gun gang, huh? That's what it is. No, absolutely. Echoing what Mama Dent said, like we all have the power to choose, and God doesn't necessarily make those choices from us. And I think part of what we have to recognize is that, you know, in those choices come consequences, and something that may be good for us may not be good for somebody else. So, you know, those consequences aren't universal in the implications for everybody, but I think, you know, more oftentimes than not is the decisions that happen and the decisions people make that cause things to happen that don't feel good for everybody.
Yeah. Mr. Biggs, I see you nodding your head. Is that in agreement to what Brother Brennan and Mama Dent was saying?
Oh, absolutely. I concur. Sometimes, you know, sometimes once you know the heart of God, he kind of like will make things plain and simple for you. And sometimes God is trying to get our attention in particular ways. And sometimes it's a hard road. You know, the word tells us one day he gets off of the mercy seat, then he gets on that seat of judgment. So sometimes when he gets on that seat of judgment, sometimes we might not have an understanding on why this is happening, you know, but sometimes God needs to get our attention. Sometimes he needs to bring something to the front. And, you know, sometimes, you know, people become so caught up in life, they'll forget about certain things. And they won't, and then God needs to wake us up, you know. And sometimes it's, you know, that's just it's unfortunate, but that's just the way it comes. You know, I was always told as a little boy, you know, you always say, man, you don't supposed to question God. You don't supposed to question God. It's been times I have asked the question. I ain't gonna lie. I go and I ask God. I mean, I'm seeing all these other people out here doing dirt, and you took this person. I don't have an understanding of that, you know. And you know, God has you know, he has communicated with me on different reasons. And sometimes, you know, especially when we lose loved ones that's close, sometimes God wants our attention and might have an assignment for us, and we're using that person as a crutch and things like that, and God has to remove that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I literally just went through that situation. not necessarily with a person, but actually it was more with a job. And God had been like literally telling me for about 3 years, like, hey man, I got some other things I want you to do outside of that job, but I had devoted so much of me to doing well in this position. And then, you know, it got pulled away. And then it was like, oh no, life's over. And it was like, it wouldn't be over if you'd have just listened, you know.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of that dichotomy of me making my own decision and then looking at a bad situation and having to realize, like, hey, you made this decision a while ago that caused this. Like, and this may have been in the plan the whole time, but it wouldn't have been bad if you'd listened.
Yeah.
And so that kind of leads to that, that definitely that questioning of God. And I don't know, I always struggle with that whole, don't question God thing, because I know there's a story in the Bible of somebody that wrestled with God for a while with an angel, and he walked out with a limp the rest of his life. But so I might take my limp if I can get the right answer from God.
Yeah, Matt, I don't want to leave you out the equation, brother. If you thought you was gonna get away without saying something, I'm coming to you, Matt.
Okay, so I think there's something in like who makes the decision. Like I think I am okay with a God who lets me suffer for my own terrible decisions. Like if I do something dumb, I'm gonna deal with that. Or even in Brennan's case, like if I do something stubborn, or if I do something like
appreciate that, Matt. Appreciate that.
I think what's hard for me is when you look at like, wealth concentration and like 10 people own like 60% of the world's wealth. Like I get the individual decision-making component, but like there is no way that a just God allows someone to keep that much money, or there's no way that a just God allows, like people make terrible decisions when they're in power, but where's God in like, you know what? Like slavery is a bad policy. Like I'm going to try and do something about that, as opposed to, this sort of 200, 300 year story. And then, oh, William Wilberforce is this great white savior of everyone. This idea that God allows suffering makes me very uncomfortable. And I think there are two different conversations there. There's one is like, did I do something silly? Therefore, these are the consequences, as opposed to, are we allowing systems and structures to exist that create harm, that are causing harm to a huge number of people because of one or two people's decisions? And I think that's where I get a little uncomfortable with this God allowing suffering conversation.
Yeah.
Well, I would say to you, Matt, we know that God gives us a construct about how God wants us to interact with God and how God wants us to interact with one another. And so when it comes to the issue of us making conscious decisions to do things, that's one issue. But I was thinking, and this has really been on my heart, the situation in Turkey, the earthquake in Turkey. And I was thinking to myself, there were earthquakes during biblical times. And what happened wasn't because of anything anybody in Turkey did. It was a bad thing, though. It is a terrible tragedy. Mm-hmm. So I hear what you're saying. There are different situations and scenarios where bad things occur. And the ones where we make the choices to inflict the harm on one another are the ones that we wrestle with the hardest. I think we're much more prayerful and showing more grace for those, I'll say, natural disasters, if you will. But it's when we start running amok, but God holds us accountable, just like he held Adam and Eve accountable. We don't know when, where, or how, but we do know there's accountability, and you will pay the price for not lining up, if you will. And so some of these situations have to exist so that we know the difference. It's like, how do you know peace if you have no storm?
Mm-hmm. And I think kind of to that point, Matt, I think I struggle with some of that point of view, because I think from if we look at the Bible and think about Job, like in a sense, God allowed that to happen and encouraged it. He encouraged that testing of Job, and I'm sure to Job, none of that felt good. Like, we read his words, not one single second of that felt like yes, and it wasn't, necessarily a great thing for him to experience. But and so I definitely understand like the struggle with thinking that God would allow it. And I think that's part of what actually a sermon I shared with Ray last week that I watched from a church in Louisville, Bates Memorial Church in Louisville. It actually revealed kind of a personal struggle I had because, I've been one of those people that's like, I go about my day and my life trying to be the best person I can. I don't try and ruffle no feathers. I don't try to disrespect anybody. I want to bring peace, love, joy to the world. Like, fam, why do people really keep they test your patience, they push you to the edge? I'm a native New Yorker. Like, I don't always deal with passive aggressiveness in a polite and mature manner. Sometimes, that native New Yorker comes out and you're just gonna get aggression. And it's not always, and it is not even always that like I purposely go about it in that, that is my intent to be aggressive, but how I come off, how I talk. I actually told somebody today, like, I'm from New York down south. Sometimes I could breathe and, offend or hurt somebody's feelings. Sometimes it feels like, so it's like, it's not even necessarily that it's my intention to do it, but it happens. And so like part of my internal struggle has just been, God, like, why? It doesn't make any sense. I didn't do anything to deserve this. I don't think, and if I did, let me know so I don't do it again. But in the sermon, it kind of came to the point where it's like, if with being chosen people of God and being a part of God's children, like other people see that too. And so like when God chooses us, our enemies also choose us. And sometimes as we work and God, sees us, and God helps us along our journey, we start to develop and things like that. It sometimes can wake up, issues and demons and other people that has nothing to do with us. And then again, they may feel that my development and elevation is a threat or, is something bad for them when it's not necessary. That has nothing to do with them. But they can take it as that and still look at it like, God, why are you allowing this person to be elevated and not me? Or why is this person developing and not me? And so that's where I think that some of it, I mean, absolutely natural disasters, I don't like, that is, God, you're all knowing, and those things happen for a reason that I probably will never understand and probably will never fully accept. But I think that there's also some element of that more human side where, things happen and not everybody is on the same journey at the same time and at the same place. And because of that, we got to deal with our human side.
I wanted to, sometimes when you look at certain situations and things, you never really, like you said, you certain people walk away not really understanding it. And I just look at my journey as far as it go with, I'm very passionate about this literacy, gun violence, and all of that. Who would have thought out of the space of that tragedy where that little girl got killed, it would have pushed me into this destiny of doing this movie? But it was that, in that space, to where God talked to me personally and told me, say, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? And sometimes we see things like that, and we're on the outside and we try to understand why. And I used to always say, well, Lord, I mean, how can, I know Sodom and Gomorrah had to come down, but I'm sure it was kids and babies there that didn't do nothing. Why would they have to go too? You know what I mean? But when God does something, sometimes you don't know, you know what I mean? You don't have an understanding on where it's coming from. So maybe it was for Lot to see, well, when God brings judgments down, my kids and everybody else can suffer because of some of the decisions that I make. I don't know if that was the reason, but I'm just saying that sometimes in the space of that tragedy, something good could come about. I don't know, maybe it could be something else that happens in Turkey that'll make that more understandable later on. Maybe it's somebody there that who God is pushing into destiny. I mean, we just don't know. I just know, like I say, my journey and out of the space of that tragedy. I remember I was doing ride sharing at the time. And it seemed like every day I rode by that mural. And I remember one time I just pulled over And it was like I would see it and see it and see it, but then it was just like it came alive. And I say, this little girl, and I read an article, and I say, this little girl just had nothing but audacity, but just to be a little girl. That's it. And now she's gone. I mean, you know, and it's like everybody else is just going on about their life and functioning. And I'm like, man, do y'all see what's happening? You know, so that's what I'm saying. Sometimes when we see that tragedy, you know, we never know when we in that space, you know, God, why? You know, that's why I say I'm always like, why? You know, these people don't do nothing to nobody. But, you know, God being God. You know?
Matt, were you about to say something?
And I think this is the hard part that I struggle with, right? Is that there is, like, to Mr. Biggs, your story, right? Like, the work that you're doing is incredible and is probably saving lives left, right, and center. But every time you tell that story, I think of that little girl's family who are now mourning the loss of a kid. And, like, why the frack did it take the loss of a kid for anyone in the community to pay attention? Like, granted, like, I totally understand that, you know, different people have different, you know, different levels of engagement, and there's different spaces where people hear, but it always seems to come out of this, like, you know, some terrible tragedy happened, multiple people were harmed in some way, shape, or form, and then there's this redemptive arc, which is powerful in the redemptive arc, but I think I'm struggling with the tragedy that started it. And I think that's where I have a lot. I just, like, you know, why do people have to be harmed for us to be forced into action? Why does, you know, I to Mama Dent's point, there could be this wonderful, powerful story that comes out of Turkey and Syria, and I genuinely hope there is, but there are also 20,000 plus grieving families. And I just, like, I totally understand what you're all saying about the arc of justice and moving forward, but there's people that are harmed before we get there. I think that's the place that I struggle, and I genuinely hear what you're saying. I just can't get past it.
I wanted to read this comment. I'm trying to see if I can get back because I am all over the place tonight. But yeah, so Jawan, good to see you. That's one of our Wellians. Good to see you, Jawan. I love this comment. He says, God's only responsibility is to be God. And you know, then brother Pastor Harrison, Minister Harrison is following it up. He's got the well page tonight. He says, and we know that in all things, he quotes the scriptures from Romans 8:28, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. It's amazing because this first question is really a deep question that could keep us you know, for the rest of our lives, really. But I think what I love about Jawan's response is, in all honesty, I just don't think there's times when we won't know. And I think that is the key to allowing ourselves to be human, right? Is that God, and here's what because I'm very cautious. I have to catch my own self. Sometimes, even as a pastor, we can begin to preach, and I notice we'll say things, right? Like, we'll make declarations. Until you do this, God will not give you this, right? Or we'll say, you know, God does not bless, or God does not move. But if we're honest, we are always hoping and praying that we're being led by the Holy Spirit. But even then, we don't really know, right? And so I think we, as Christians, especially those of us who are mature Christians even, have to be able to say to people, I don't know. You know, I heard T.D. Jakes one time say that, you know, he talked about a death. There was a death in the church, and one of the leaders of the church had experienced a death, and he said he walked into the room, and the person said, you know, Pastor or Bishop, why did this happen? Why did God let this happen? He said, and he said in my immature days, I would try to come over response. Well, sometimes God is trying to get our attention. Sometimes God is trying to move. He said, but in my mature Christian days, I responded, I don't know. What we have to focus on is what we who are left do now. And I think that's the place that we have to get to in this question is sometimes we really just don't know why God allows things to happen. We can come up with answers all day, but in truth, we just don't know. And I think that we have to be, and let me say this and I'll move on, but I think one of the biggest reasons we have to do that is why we get called hypocrites as a church. I think that's why we get labeled as a church, because we oftentimes want to act as if we know, right? We want to act as if we are all knowing like God. Well, because I'm a pastor, I am qualified to answer for God. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm a deacon, because I'm an usher, because I'm because I've been baptized.
Because I pay my tithes.
You know what I'm saying? Because I pay my tithes, right? And I'm the highest tither, right? So I got a front seat in the church. So I'm qualified to answer the question. But in all honesty, I think so many times we miss where God is maybe asking us to go. And that is to just simply say, I don't know. And maybe, just maybe that's why God allows bad things to happen. So that we can then go, I don't know, but I tell you who does. Let me direct you to the person who does, and then y'all work it out. I'm not gonna be God's mouthpiece, and this ain't a moment for me to be God's mouthpiece. I'm gonna let God handle that. Hey, big dog, what you gonna say? You know? I recluse myself. That's it.
But that's also Pastor Ray. That's a part of the process as in your walk, because you always have to get to a place where you trust Him. When you don't know, I trust you. You know what I mean? And I think all of us have came to, that part in our life in this walk to where it's like you say, we not going to know, and God is not going to tell us, you know what I mean? Sometimes I think sometimes He will, sometimes He won't. But that's where He say that's when you get to that point in your life, just like David said. I think it was David. No, it was Job. Even though you slay me, yet will I trust you. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's, and I'll say, even for me, sometimes that trusting piece is the most difficult piece in the walk. That's the hardest thing in the world to do.
I mean, sometimes it feels like, and I mean, I think it's partially because of our reference of who God is, like in like Pops, like why you letting them beat on me? Like stop this. What are we doing here? Like, I'm your child. Like, you love me. This ain't love. But we also have to recognize, again, in kind of, what Pastor Ray was saying earlier. And I think it also kind of leads into our second question for tonight is like, is the response sometimes is, and I mean, again, I definitely don't want to put out there the notion that, God does bad things, so we'll respond the right way. But more so it's like in that, like, I think sometimes the lesson that He wants us to learn, and even in, those tragic situations is like, He may use it to help remind us of some things that we haven't taken care of, or things or areas where we should be focusing that we haven't focused on. So taking a natural disaster or something like that, and now a ministry that's probably been being led to build a humanitarian response ministry or something, or a program in their church, like they may have been being pushed there for 5 years, but it took a natural disaster, a flood or something like that, for them to finally see, okay, this is why we need to do this. We need to do this now. And we have to, like, we're in a situation where we have to. And I can recognize for myself, like, sometimes, like my job, God put me in a real situation where I had to change. Like, I couldn't focus on this job anymore and put all my energy into it because I didn't work there. And I didn't have the same access. So even if I wanted to stay, I didn't have the same access to, to continue to do the job in that manner. So I'll take the job of reading the second question. If God has allowed bad things to happen, then how do we, as representatives of God's people, aka the church, respond?
And I want to jump right into this again, because I really think that you all touched on it before we even got here. And I think it was, as Pastor Ray said, sometimes with, our response is, I don't know. Other times it's to be present. But in all times, it is to look to God and how God has equipped us for those times and those moments, and then to be a representative in that situation, whether it be to start a ministry or, for example, Mr. Biggs and I have been talking about the initiative. He's talked about the literacy. And I'm very passionate about children and about youth and about discipling. And so I want us to get our children back. And one of the ways that I believe we can do that is through a literacy project. I may not be able to do it on a big scale, but maybe I can do it in small ways by telling somebody else who has the resources to do it. As I said, I was telling my barber about it, and my barber was like, hey, look, yeah, I would be down for that. So now I'm sharing information so that we can, in fact, in little bits, touch, knowing that ultimately all of this is God's responsibility, and we can only be God's agent where God has placed us for those times.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, it's hard to follow up that response. So I ain't gonna lie.
I know.
I'm gonna let somebody else have this one.
Mr. Biggs, help me out.
No, and you and Reverend Dent, you're so absolutely right. And sometimes that's another part of the trust piece, because, and I mean divine connections. And me and Pastor Ray was talking about that just a few days ago. About sometimes, society calls it serendipity, but sometimes it's when God he does certain things and he put it together, and you don't know further out what's going to actually happen. You know what I mean? Just like I knew I wanted to make this movie, but I never thought that, okay, I need to be able to talk to these people in a vernacular sort of way, in an urban, hardcore, for people to get an understanding of it. Now, who would have known when I did this that I would have church folk actually come up and say, man, I get that. You know what I mean? Even with the profanity and everything else, they had an understanding of it. Who would have ever thought that literacy was going to be another part of this, to where it can help the entire society? You know what I mean? But that's, like I say, where that trust piece come in. And as you start walking in your call and doing, you know what I mean? God will finish the rest of it. Sometimes, he just need us to trust him, to take that step. You know what I mean? And I think that's the part of the response, to where, you'll go. I remember this, our youth pastor said one time, she said, Jonathan, when God has a divine assignment for you, and I might have shared this before, he said, you're going to do it because he's God. You know what I mean? He's going to have his way. She said, now the decision that you're going to have to make is you're going to do it with one arm, no legs, or whatever, but you're going to do it. You know what I mean? Because he's God. And I think that sometimes when we respond so much out of the flesh, instead of stopping and say, okay, God, but what is you trying to tell me? You know what I mean? I ain't comfortable with this. You know what I mean? It was just like the story of Moses. God, I can't go talk to them people. I stutter, I this, I that, and this, that, and other. And then, who I'm going to tell them that sent me? I can't go tell them there's a burning bush up here telling me to go tell Pharaoh that he going to look at me like, Joe, what is you talking about? You know what I mean? And then God said, you tell him I am that I am. You know what I mean? I'm running this. You just do what I say. And then as he told him to pick the staff up. Now, who would have ever thought that staff was going to eat snakes? That staff was going to turn water into blood, bring all these. Who would have ever thought that? It was it was a stick.
Yeah. But Mr. Biggs, I think to your point, man, like I think we don't respond because we're scared most of the time. You know,
Man,
like I think
said a mouthful.
you know what I mean, like that. Like I think
Facts.
that's just it, right? Like we are always, God, am I enough? Right?
Mhm.
God, is it? Are you to your point with Moses? Are you sure it's me? You know, are you sure you want to send me? You know, and I think that is the biggest reason we don't respond, and I think that that's the biggest trick of the enemy, right? I
Yeah.
think the biggest trick of the enemy, whether you think it's Satan, whether you think it's forces of this world, whether you think it's people, whatever your enemy is, I think the enemy is always manipulating you to be scared of who you are. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the biggest reason we don't respond. Jawan, man, listen, Jawan is on it. I love you, brother. Jawan says, y'all brought up Job. He responded with worship. He responded with consistency. I love that because I think worship gets overlooked so much. And it gets, I think worship gets a second often to prayer, but I think worship can at times be bigger than prayer. And let me just give biblical illustrations, right, to go along with what I'm saying. So we see the walls of Jericho fall down once they worshiped, right? We see Gideon beat the battle or win the battle when Gideon worshiped. You know what I'm saying? So many times in the Bible, we find that when the people of God worship God, their problems seem to become smaller. And Jawan says, because worship is the sacrifice. And Jawan, I agree with you. I think to some extent, sacrifice is the sacrifice is your ego. I think to say, right, because in all those examples, we even see, right, when Gideon wins the battle, it's Gideon being able to say, look, I'm not strong enough to do this by myself, right? We see Moses and the people of God, when they worship, God provided everything that they needed because they were humble enough to put God first. And so I think, Jawan, you just bring up this good point. I think worship, what's the song? This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles, right? Like I think when we worship, we lay it on the line. God, you're in charge.
You know what? Ray, man, the story that reminds me exactly of that and like literally letting go of your ego is David worshiping out his clothes. He didn't pray out his clothes. He worshiped like he danced out of his clothes in that moment, and like he was king and got criticized for it by wifey at the time. One of the few. And so it's like that's a whole different discussion into conversation. But like, I mean, it definitely. I think part of it is because, and I think part of it sometimes is more important for us to worship than to pray, because like prayer is that conversation, and if we pray, we're not gonna get the response that we want from God most times. Like and I mean, in some situations, like there's no response that can really, make us feel good in that moment. Like if you lose a loved one, you in the turkey situation or something like that, like God telling you, I did it because such and such, it ain't gonna matter to you because you still feel that loss in the moment.
Good.
More often time than not. And I'll speak for myself. It ain't gonna matter to me. Like I don't care at the moment. But I think in taking that time to worship, it helps to remind you of like who God is. He's all knowing. He's all powerful. Okay, you got this. I'm gonna keep saying this until I believe it. Hopefully, or until you show me that you got this in some way, or you show me how I need to respond and how I get through this. Like, I mean, it's the Romans 8:28. Like we know it. And all right, God, now it needs to start working because I ain't seeing the good right now. I need that. I know all things work. And I'm saying I know, so I'm worshiping you right now because I need the good to come through.
Can I jump in and color outside of the lines just a little bit?
Absolutely.
Come on in, Mama.
There are two things that we've talked about. One is worship, one is prayer. Mm-hmm. And I think we, in some ways, maybe in tradition, limit what worship and prayer look like. And I'm going to use an inanimate object to make my point. How do trees worship God?
Just
They
doing
just
what
are.
they do.
They exist.
Nobody had to tell them they were a tree. Trees don't ask God for water. Trees don't say, ouch, that lightning struck me and hit. Trees serve the purpose in which God created them. Is that not worship?
Yeah, that's Joanne's
And
point.
so-
He responded with consistency.
Exactly. And so in each of our giftings, whatever measure of faith God has given us, whatever gifts God has given us, we worship God through the exercise of those things. And our prayer is conversation. Even the conversation we're having tonight is prayer, because we are expressing what's on our hearts. And we're expressing that because we have a heart for the things of God and the things that God has a heart for. And so even now, we are in intense prayer because we're in intense conversation, yes, with one another, but ultimately with God.
Yeah.
And you know,
So now I put my crayons down.
Listen, I love the comment that, listen, Jawan, he said what we all said. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. Big. I didn't mean to cut you off.
nah, and I totally agree with that. You know, and it's like you said, it's in, I think it, I forget what prophet it was. He said, when you consider the lily, it doesn't toil. It knows what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
You know, and so it don't worry about it. So, you know, and that's this form of worship because it knows God is gonna take care of it. And that's when I think it was in the Psalms. It say, why are you worried about it? God is, and I think that's where that trust piece is so important. You know what I mean? And as you trust, I remember one time I had made some terrible decisions in my life. And my uncle had told me, he said, I want you to think about the worst thing in that has ever happened to you. The worst thing that has ever happened to you. Don't say it, but just think about it. And I thought, and he said, God took you through it, didn't he? And I said, yeah. And he said, he's going to take you through this. And that's the part of the growth. You know what I mean? To where it's to say, okay, I might not be there in the beginning, you know what I mean? But I still got a little mustard seed faith. But that mustard seed grows. It do. You know what I mean? And as, like you say, as we begin to worship and as we have the conversation with God and then we worship and then trust him and then he moves us into our destiny. At least that's the way I think.
So I know this question isn't on, but I just want to bring us back there to gangs and guns. We've talked about, we identified these gangs, right? We talked about political figures, often the gangs, right? That's the clique. We talked about the actual gangs, right? Those the gangs that exist on the street, Bloods, Crips, all that stuff. We talk about guns. We talk about the fact that some hip hop music, right, leads us into a place that, right, that takes us into a violent place or whatever, which I miss Brendan in that conversation so much. We talk about,
I'll let y'all slide on that one. I promise you, because we ain't gonna go into it.
we see this place where we have all these people that we can identify as the enemy. In that place, how then do we find God? How do we find God in those places where when we're up against those powers, principalities, rulers of darkness, when we're up against that stuff of the flesh? How do we respond? How do we find God in those moments? How do we take on that mantle? And I know it's maybe 3 questions in one, but I guess the 2 questions are, how do we find God in those times? Because somebody's watching, right? Or somebody will watch and says, all right, I get it, right? We're supposed to, we talk about, the enemy. We talk about rough stuff. We talk about, well, we don't know why it happened. Well, then how do I find God in those moments? That's the first question. And I think to add to that, how do you personally how in your way, how do you respond? How do you represent God in those moments?
Ooh, I this past Sunday in service, my pastor did something that just took me out before he even began to preach. I love my pastor, the Reverend Dr. Henry P. Davis III. He is one of the most awesome people.
Shout out.
You know, I had to. We had someone come in who was not necessarily operating in the same manner that most people typically come to church. And pastor acknowledged the person because the person was about to kind of step a little bit out of sync. And the pastor acknowledged the person and then went on. Pastor came out of the pulpit, walked over, put his hand on the person's shoulder, listened to their concern, spoke with them, and then went on back up into the pulpit to continue the service. And what I said to the pastor at the end of the service was, Pastor, you just taught me another lesson that we overlook.
Mm.
You saw the person's humanity.
Mm.
And that's how we respond to God, even to the ones who've got guns, even to the ones who are in gangs, even to the ones that are not doing what we would expect God would call us to do. We have to first start with seeing their humanity, because that's what God does with us. God sees our humanity. God knows that we're not going to be on the right page. And that's why we have grace and mercy. God knows this already, you know? So we have to start with seeing each other's humanity, looking at each other in the way God does. That's where I would say I would start. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to agree with the behavior that I see, but I got to first see your humanity. Does anybody come into the world with aspirations to be a murderer? Does anyone come into the world with aspirations to steal? That to me is not humanity and who God created us to be. But there are things that happen in our lives. Who knows why? But I got to first start by seeing your humanity.
You mean I got to treat people who actually are with abortion rights or aren't with abortion rights like they're human?
Yep.
Okay. You mean I got to treat Republicans or Democrats like they're human?
Yep.
Even the ones that yell out when the president's speaking?
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Even the one whose mother drove him.
That's why God's still working on me.
Look, even the one whose mother drove him from Wisconsin with the AR-16, who shot the people and then was, judged not guilty. Yeah, even that one. Even the one who went into Mother Emanuel and sat through the Bible study. Even that one. I didn't tell you that it wasn't a tall order. I didn't tell you that. But I got to see your humanity. If I don't see your humanity, how can I operate the way that God would call me to operate?
But that also wasn't okay, right? Like a lot of the things that you've described, like, yes, there's humanity in that person, but we also have to recognize that that wasn't okay and that there needs to be some sort of response to that.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't say that you don't hold people accountable. I didn't say that. That's not what I intend to infer either. But I also still have to go with, I got to start with seeing your humanity. If I don't, am I going to get to where God goes? And God doesn't expect me to be perfect. Thank the Lord. God expects me to be fully human, knowing that if I were ever God, there would be no need for one. I'm grateful to be human. Let God do God's thing.
And Mr. Biggs, I know you about to speak. Let me say this and it's called grace. It's called grace, right? Because God has grace with me, with my old ignorant, right? Do wrong, did some stupid stuff I knew I shouldn't have done, cursed somebody out when I shouldn't have, judged them in my mind, right? God had grace with me, right? And saw me, even in the midst of my sin, God saw me as God's child. And so what you're saying is, if I'm gonna act like God, got to see somebody else's God's child too. I cringe because I saw you, Butterfly. Butterfly said, "Nah, I'm gonna cut their head off with their own sword like David." I got you, Butterfly, because I was right there. It's times when I be like, I ain't letting this. Matt, I was with you, Matt.
Hey, hold on, talk about. And to go with Butterfly, that sermon I mentioned earlier, it talked about Peter, and the pastor was like, "Now Peter was my type of preacher, because when the smoke came to Jesus, he cut somebody's ear off. Like, that's my type of guy." You feel me? Like, it was so it's like, even, and I think that's the example as Christians. Like, Christ is the example of how we respond, how we engage in these moments. And when I think about personally, like when I think about Jesus being in the desert, in the desert land, like, and being tempted by the devil, like, his response in that moment was like just being firm in who he was and being consistent in who he was. And it's like, you absolutely right. I could 100% feed myself, jump off this mountain and be straight. But that's not my role. That's not what I'm supposed to do. And I think, to Matt's point, because I definitely have struggled with that too, that accountability piece, because showing the grace is cool, but like, fam, you're not about to be out here just like thinking that that's cool. It's not going to be
that's the New York,
right? Like, you feel me? Like, yeah, it's like, I'm gonna give you the grace, but yeah, we got to have an understanding that this can't happen no more. But I think that in some respects, that's the piece where I think for us as humans, we have to recognize that, like, it's not even our responsibility to hold these folks accountable.
Wow.
And that's the part that's hard, because we want to, and we want to feel like there's some type of resolution to this, but having to let go of that is the piece that we have to work on and recognize our humanity. Because it's like, yo, fam, you feel me? Like, it's like I can be the person who received the most harm from someone's actions, but it's not my responsibility, because then if I take on that responsibility, sometimes it turns into me seeking revenge, and that's not of God.
I listen. I tell people all the time, and I know people don't want to hear this. Listen, my grandmother, I know she's watching, but we talk about Trump, right? And I would tell people all the time, I have some Republican views and some Democrat views. I do not have Trump views. And so let me be very clear, right? And so but
be clear about that.
Let me be clear, right? But here's the thing. I am very aware that Trump could be, I'm not saying he is. Let me be very clear. I'm not saying he is. He could be a modern day Paul. I recognize that he is still God's child. And so at some point, God could totally take over his heart. I don't believe he has his heart right now.
He could
take over his heart.
Boy, you stretching that, Grace.
I know I am, but let me be clear. Let's go back though. That was who Paul was. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we even, to me, I think biblically, we get our first glimpse of Paul, even as a young Paul, when we talk about Stephen, because when the Pharisees were stoning Stephen, right? They mentioned very briefly, and Paul, young Paul, was watching. That's all we get. And then we get further down where we realize, right, that Paul is from these same people, right? And Paul is this person who believes in prosecuting those who believe in Jesus. I mean, he was that day's Trump. He's like, kill them. You know what I'm saying? If they kill the immigrants, kill the folks that don't look like us, kill the people that ain't from here, kill all the coloreds. Kill them all, right? That's all. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Ramon, when someone blinds Trump on the side of the road and gouges out both of his eyes, then I'm with you. But until then,
yeah, he gotta have. I gotta be there. Matter of fact, I ain't gonna believe it for a while. I'm gonna be doubting Thomas doubting Thomas for a minute. I need to see it. God. You got to show me.
That was Ananias. But that was Ananias. I mean, God was like, look, Ananias, there's a guy, I've blinded him, and I need you to go to him. Right. He's like, who? He's like, Paul. He's like, Paul. God. God, all of a sudden I don't have good reception, guy. I my antenna.
Just
hello,
that quick, the line broke.
but yeah, I just think that's the grace, right? I think that's the grace is to what you said, Reverend Mama Dan, is can we have grace? Can we see them as human? That's a huge. Oh, that's a huge thing. And Brennan, you make this point that I think even it got me. Like, it's not our job to hold them accountable. Good God, like that thing is stretching me. Like it's stretching me tonight.
Yeah.
I'm like, ah.
But now, I'm gonna say I haven't completely bought into that either, Ray. Okay, Brennan, I love you, but I think I'm kind of on Matt's side now. Wait a minute, now we gotta hold these people accountable in some way. Now, come on, give me a little bit.
No, absolutely. I'm not saying in no way do we hold them accountable, and I think part of it is accepting that our way of holding it accountable is like I'm gonna tell you this was wrong, and for this reason. But it's like and to hold you accountable, like I told you this. Now, if you do it again, I'm gonna do my best to show you grace, but like I'm holding you accountable to the fact, like next time you can't say it was a mistake. And this is again in those situations of people making decisions, or next time you can't say it was an accident. No, like because I told you last time, like no, don't do this no more. But like so in that type of situation, like yeah, we hold them accountable, but it's like the resolution of it. It's not always on us, and sometimes it's on us to simply just like again share and communicate in that moment. Hey yo, you did something. This how it made me feel. I don't like feeling like this. I don't like what you did. I would hope that you would change, and I'm gonna pray for you to change. But in the meantime, God loves you, and I do too.
Well, I don't know. I think telling them that there are going to be repercussions and consequences is important. And I think there need to be some repercussions and consequences. Mm-hmm. David had some repercussions and consequences, mm-hmm. and we do have some of those. But there are some things, though. Look, I can jump on both sides and go back to what mm-hmm. Matt was saying. 10 people with 90% of the world's wealth. There's a problem with that. There's a problem mm-hmm. with that. Now, mm-hmm. I don't know that I can do anything individually to change that, but there's some children in my community who can't read. I can influence that. And maybe it's God's intent that 60 years from now, one of them will be the president of the United States and will make a difference, like kind of like when he said to Abraham, your descendants will be like, the grains of sand. I say Abraham touched the future. He wasn't there to see it, but he touched the future because he was obedient to what God called him to do. But we recognize that stuff happens, man, and we are human and we fall short. I'm not going to tell you that I haven't had a family member who was murdered, because I did. Man crushed me to no end. And it took some time. It took some time to move through that situation. I didn't want to see humanity when that happened. Mm-hmm. So I'm not telling you that that's where you start, but you pray that as God works with us, God can move us through those things. And the good news is we aren't stuck in a space. We're always coming through.
And maybe that grace is, I think about the Trayvon Martins. I think about the Breonna Tellers. I think about the George Floyds. I think about the list can go on and on and on. But one thing that, oh my God, why is his name slipping me? The latest one,
Tyre
Nichols. His mom said, she her heart broke not only for her son, but her heart broke for the 5 cops, the 5 officers that did it as well. And I think maybe to our point, to everyone's kind of point, that maybe there's so if I can offer a balance, I think the balance is there. His mom has sense enough not to go out and kill, right, or try to kill or plot to kill the 5 officers. However, I don't think that she wants them to be walking on the streets either. And so she wants that due process to go, right? And so there is a punishment, there is accountability. And we hope at each time that there's accountability by the law. And I think that's the grace, right? I'm not gonna kill you, but I'm very sure going to make sure that you sit a couple of days, years in prison to think about, right? And to be punished. And you're not gonna live your life just any old way. So maybe that's the place where there's the accountability. I don't know. Listen, what I have discovered is we ain't God.
I'm just saying, like, Butterfly might be from New York. Like she might be from New York, because this, like, the energy she giving me, like the line of the whole comment, I ain't God and I got hands. Like I be needing people to understand that sometimes. You feel me? Like I ain't God and I promise you these hands work. And I don't want to use these hands, but like I want to use them for love. But sometimes, it be situations, and that's where it's like, again, it like that. The statement I made was more from a learned thing, from being someone that grew up in certain situations and feeling like I had to be aggressive and I had to use my hands in situations where I felt like I was wrong and I had to respond and hold people accountable. And then those actions or my choices in those moments led to bad things happening to me, or putting myself in bad situations. And so it's like, all right, God, I don't like this happened to me, but I responded in this way and I felt good, but it brought this. So it's like, all right, God, so then what do? And then it honestly came to a point where God was just like, well, who told you to respond like that? Okay, so how was I supposed to respond? And then it's like, okay, I'm gonna try, but I need you to know that my first response is going to be to go here and to hold them accountable. But that's when it was one of the clearest moments I ever heard God, speak to me. He was like, "Who do you think you are?" And I was like, first of all, don't ask me a question like that. you can't ask me a question like that. But like in the realest sense, like, Brennan, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are that you are now this arbiter of your hurt or your pain, and you determine what accountability looks like, or holding someone accountable looks like for me, because in the end, it is his plan, his actions, his moves. Like, he put the pieces in place for me to come in contact with this person or this experience. And like, yes, it sucks to sometimes have to relinquish that and to feel like this person wasn't held accountable, but it's not my responsibility. And I can't hold myself to, like, no, I can't let this go until I feel like they've been held accountable. That was more of the thing. Like, absolutely, there's accountability in it, but it's not my responsibility in the end.
So
I want to push back just a tiny little bit on that and just say, like, I think there is a role as someone that's been victimized in responding to that and saying, like, what does accountability look like? Because that's really important. Like, what do you need to get well is a really important part of accountability. And I think we sort of default to this, like, I want to punish someone, whether it's in this world or in a future world, and that is how we come to terms with what they did to us, is that there will be consequences, and if there aren't consequences now, there'll be consequences later. And actually, like, we need to push back and say, like, I'm not sure I want consequences now. I want to understand what the hell is the reason why you did this, because this was a completely irrational thing to me. I want to understand why you did this irrational thing. And also,
so Matt, what happens when we don't get that?
Well, two conversations there, but I think, and I'll say this and then I'll stop, but I think most people who cause harm don't know why they cause the harm in the moment and would like an opportunity to process why they cause that harm, whether that's with the person that they cause the harm to, or whether that's in a separate context. And if, to the remainder that don't, I don't have a freaking clue. But I would like to work with the majority of folks that, like, most people who caused harm didn't mean to. Whether they consciously would frame it like that, but like most of the folks that I've worked with who have, you know, done 20, 30 years for murder, like, I didn't want to kill that person. I just wanted my $20 drug sale, and this person's life became a consequence in that drug sale. And you know, you can't reconcile the two. I'm not trying to reconcile the two, but like, they weren't trying to kill that person. They were trying to do business, and somebody got in the way. And so I think working through a process of like, you didn't mean to cause the harm that you did. We need to resolve the harm that you caused, but also understanding that if somebody had given you a, you know, slightly sharpened pen, you'd have done the same thing as you did with the gun, and the harm would have been very different.
I kind of think I think it's kind of two things going on when you say, you know, because I think sometimes when Tyree Nichols' mother said her heart went out, you know, she's grieving her son, but she's grieving the officers. I think what she was talking about, she wanted justice, but she still wanted to be able to love them also. And I think sometimes when we start talking accountability, and then it's, well, what does that look like for us? To where you say, okay, well, I just want justice. I want justice. I want to see things, you know, happen a certain kind of way. Because, you know, accountability, this is when I was younger, and you've done something, me getting you back exactly for what you did was not enough for me.
I gotta get you worse.
I needed to go a little bit further, because I needed to be looking like I'm on top. So, you know, it's like, I think us as believers, you know, I told somebody one time, I said, you know, I don't have, as a believer, I don't have the luxury of not loving you, no matter what you do. I have to love you in spite of you. Now, that's a difficult place. You know, I did a book on the 10 reasons why Black folks should love Donald Trump. And at the end of the book, well, it came up with all of these different things. And then at the end of the book, I asked a question, and I said, okay, well, we have seen all of the things, all of the bad things he's done, and this, that, and the other. My job as a believer, I got to love him in spite of that. And that's a hard place. This walk, I always come to the conclusion, this walk ain't easy. You know, they used to sing the old church, you know, I'm going to go sweeping into heaven. I'm looking to barely get in. You know what I mean? Because this walk is not easy at all. I've told people, I say, man, you need to be walking with God so much to whereas if you know this guy's a Ku Klux Klan and this car break down and you have the means to help him, you need to help that man. That's a part of humanity. You know, because Jesus said, loving somebody that love you, them Pharisees over there do that. Love that man that hates you. God, how many times I got to forgive him? 7 times 70 in one day. What? That means if he come and do this and that, I'm not telling you to be stupid and stand there and let that man beat on you, but you need to get out the way. You need to do whatever you need to do, but you don't need to respond in that type of way. And I've always thought tyrants in society have been able to take over, just like we see the border crisis, and we see all of these people trying to get here. They just want an opportunity and a better life. It has become because certain people have dehumanized them the same way the Nazis dehumanized the Jewish population, to whereas people could do bad things to them because they felt like they were subhuman. So I can walk in this church and kill these black folk because they not human, they not like me. I can put these people on a bus and, you know, 6 below zero with no shoes and socks and bring them and drop them off on the side of the road because they not human. And I've always said that, you know, the bus driver bringing them up here. And I say, okay, well, we know God, or at least I feel like God is going to hold the governor of Texas and all of that responsible for that. But you as a bus driver, do you think you bear some of that responsibility? Well, I got a job, I got to feed my family. So because this man, you need to feed your family, you going to treat this man, you going to do this person, you going to treat them like they less than human, they less than this, that, and other. So, I mean, come on, man, what is a person's humanity worth? You know, and, you know, speaking to Matt's point, to where as you see all these people, and I've always wondered, I remember one time Tupac was on there, he said, I just can't fathom having $20-something million and seeing people hungry. And I always say, I wonder if he was old, would he still have that same passion? And I've always said that in all thy getting, no matter what you're doing, I know everybody want to be successful and get the bag and all of that, but you can't forget about your humanity. And the way Jesus put it is, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? So if you're going to do all of these things and lose, is it really worth it? And then he asks you, what is your soul worth? What will you give up for your soul? You know, because this is just a vessel. We're going to spend eternity somewhere.
What he asked the rich man, he said, the rich man said, hey, can I go with you? Can I go with you? Jesus said, look, go give up everything. Go give up. Listen, Jeff Bezos, go give up Amazon, go give up everything and come back and we can talk.
Hey, he said, hey, Jeff Bezos is sending Jesus a Prime subscription.
And Musk is trying to meet him in space.
Right. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Brennan. No, go ahead, Brennan.
Matt, to your point earlier, I don't, and I hope I'm not, you know, giving off this impression. I definitely, because Matt, I completely understand what you're saying. I'm not saying that there's no accountability that we hold a person to. And I'm definitely not saying that we develop a level of tolerance to it, to say like, you know, we just continue to allow it to happen over and over again, and that person, and you know, we don't have any kind of responsibility as the person that's hurt in that moment in anything that goes on. I just think that, like, because I know for myself, one of my struggles was like feeling like even in some moments where I communicated with someone that hurt me or that caused the harm for me, it was like we'd have that conversation and that resolution of like, all right, I want you to just explain to me why. And the why like was like, nah, it gotta be another why. Because that can't be your why. and even in that situation, understanding that, like, all right, you did your part, B, and maybe that person isn't in the place where they can fully explain the why, but if you never get it, you can't stay here.
Yeah.
And sometimes that person's a dick. Like, like, as much as I believe in like restorative justice, like sometimes someone's just a bad person, and they don't need to have done a really bad thing to be a bad person. And like sometimes someone's just can't explain what they're doing because that's how they've operated in the world, and you are not the person to push back and be like, you know, I mean, look at so many women that have come forward in corporate situations that have said, like, my boss was like within the borderlines of HR, but also definitely abusive. And it's maybe not their place to push back, but also we know that person is a terrible person and we need to come up with a response to that. But I completely agree with you, Brennan. Like, maybe it's not that person that's like, I don't have the right case or the right moment or the right space, but also there's like, as much as it sucks to say this as someone that believes in the goodness of humanity, there's a lot of really awful people out there. And they're not necessarily the ones that are doing the worst things. They're just the ones that are making people feel bad on a day-to-day basis.
You know, I think when we started this conversation, one of the things that I talked about was a lot of times some of the things that we're hearing that are promoted as faith and God talk is really capitalism wrapped up in some sayings. And in my mind, one of the things that I saw in the New Testament was the communal experience. Everybody bring what you got, and let's make sure everybody's well. And unfortunately, in at least our country, I can't say everywhere else, but in our country, we don't have there is this constant tension between what's best for the community and what's in it for me. And that, I think, is one of the struggles we have. One of my professors at seminary said, having faith in Jesus will get you saved, but having the faith of Jesus will have you do what Jesus did. And so I think that's, as we grow prayerfully, I don't need to be called a Christian. I want to be a disciple and do what Jesus did.
I actually used to tell.
Amen. But
I used to tell a mentor of mine, because he would tell all these amazing stories of him being in situations and dealing with, certain folks, and I'd be like, "Yo, I ain't met that Jesus yet. I don't know if I made it to that point in the Bible yet. I don't got that faith yet. I'm working on it, but I don't got that faith yet."
and Reverend Dan, I think, society is one thing, but I guess in a sense what grieves me is that spirit has crept into the so-called church, to whereas you can have people. That's why I say I'm not worthy to be a Christian. I'm not, because I'm not Christ-like. I want to be. I'm a believer, but you have believers or Christians or whatever label you want to put on yourself, who have lost their humanity, to whereas looking out for how did that spirit, I've always wondered, how did that spirit creep and take a hold in the church so hard? You know what I mean? So I've seen churches to where people need to have funerals, and are they going to leave a love offering? Are they going to be able to cook the food? Are they going to be able to do this? And I'm saying to myself, these people are in pain, and you worrying about if they're a tither. People come to the church and they need food to eat. Well, fill this application out before we can give you a bag of food. And that's the part that, like I say, that spirit, you know what I mean? And the word tells us we don't war against flesh and blood, but against spiritual wickedness in high places. We want to say that's the precedent, but sometimes we just need to look in the front in the pulpit. Well, let me stop.
I got you.
Ray might fire me.
No. No. I love when you speak your mind. Listen, we can go on with this. I realize we have gone on with this, and I gotta cut it. Listen, this almost this could have been a 3-part. This one question and this one moment, this one conversation could have been a whole 3-part, and I'm almost mad I gotta cut it. But we're leaving. As we leave tonight, I just hope people are wrestling with what does it look like to represent God, right? Why? When I hope that people understand that when God allows bad things to happen, that we can come to a point where we say we don't always know why. I think that's one of the biggest things I want people to take away, right? It's not a sin to ask the question. But I think when we ask the question, we have to know that when we take on the mantle as a believer, a Christ believer, a Christ follower, that we also have to take on the mantle of going, I won't understand everything in this lifetime. That won't happen, right? Unless God just decides that you're the one person that God wants to understand everything. And I haven't seen it happen. Not saying it can't, it probably won't. But we have to know that that's just a thing. I think too, I've heard us talk about the response to that, and the response is prayer and worship. When we're going through, we got to figure out a way in our discipline to worship God, to pray, and to have conversation with God. And I think to the point earlier, also when bad things happen to us from other people, to just remember, however you go about your thing, however you go about life, remember that person too is a child of God, created in the image of God. Seeing that person is one of God's children. No matter what it was that they did, they are still made in the image of God and a child of God. As we leave, I just want to highlight a couple of things. I think this panel, Brendan and I, the squad, we asked these folks in particular to be a part of this conversation, and that's not to say that Matt's a squad leader.
He gay.
So is Reverend Mama
I
Deb.
was not invited.
But Matt's another. Matt is a half of a team himself. But ask because you all have taken on the mantle, including and you, Mr. Biggs, have taken on the mantle and doing the work and being the church. You all are being the church, and I think we here at the Well, and as we create this Well community, it's so important that we usher people into their purpose, which we know part of that purpose is right to represent God. It is to represent God, as to Mama Dent's earlier comment, and use the gifts of God for the people of God to create the fruit of God. And so I want to highlight that Matt and Anna Josie, who are leaders of our justice team, are doing some amazing things. We are about to start a couple of different initiatives, but I think we're in our researching phase, and we are starting to really try to learn who's out there. And as we go on, as we build our community, you all, and I've been making calls about this already, we are putting together a database that will hold resource. We believe that part of that, Mr. Biggs talked about earlier, education and resource. That resource, we want people to know where the resources are. I talked to a friend of mine who's a mom of mine. She's dealing with some stuff, a crisis of mental health in her household. And she said, Ramon, this is something that I'm so glad you all are doing, because when I went through the situations that I went through, I didn't know who to call. I didn't know where to reach out to. And so the fact that we're taking on this mantle to put this together, because we want everyone in our community to be connected. If there's a sort of resource that's available for you, we want you to be connected. And as we grow, we're not just talking about the DMV. That's where we are right now, most of us. But we're talking about nationwide. We want to know where the people are in California. If you're a part of our community, we want to take on that mantle to say we can at least begin to point you in the right direction. And so that's what the justice part is doing. So if you want to be a part of that, please reach out to us. I think I posted it today in our email. If you're not a part of our email, hey, DM us and let us know. But in our email, we talk about the fact that we're building this, and that the justice piece, if you want to reach out, we are the Well DC at gmail.com. We are the Well DC at gmail.com is our email. Reach out to us and Encounter the Well on our Facebook and Instagram. DM us, let us know that you want to be a part of that, and we'll join you. Reverend Mama Dent is a great Christian educator, and so she is over at First Baptist of Highland Park, because when you're part of the Well community, you can be a member of a church. We don't care. We're in partnership with people. That's why we don't do Sundays. And so she is extraordinary. A person that you can talk to if you need to talk to, a person that you can reach out to if you need to reach out to, but also a person who can help school you. That's why she's so. That's how she she drops the mic on us all the time, daily, because she got so many nuggets. She got so many nuggets going on in that brain of hers. And then Johnny Biggs is somebody who I've come into contact with lately, who is partnered with the Well, an amazing person who has an amazing vision. He's a motivational speaker. He is a movie producer. He is a community advocate. He is an author. Right. And listen, you all are going to see more about some of his stuff, because we're going to start posting a lot of his stuff. But he has this whole slogan, give me 15 minutes. 15 minutes could change your life. Right. If a person just gave somebody 15 minutes before they shot that trigger, can you imagine what could happen in their mind to switch the mentality of what they're to Matt's point? I didn't want to do it. I wasn't trying to kill him. I was just trying to make right. Give me 15 minutes. We could change that. We could change it in 15 minutes. He's got a movie that is amazing. PR 616 and the things that God detests. And so we're building a program, and I say we're because I'm partnering with him. I got to take some of that credit because we partnered with him.
Amen.
It's a partnership. And so, but he's the brain, he is the mastermind behind that film. And so he's trying to get into the communities and the schools. If you all belong to a school or community, that we can come and we can present this film that will change young people's lives. There's a whole process and a panel that'll be set up, and it leads into a whole strategy that goes with it. Please reach out to him, and we will list his stuff all over the Well Encounter pages so that you can get in touch with him and follow him. And also, February 25th, the Dapper Dads and Mentors brunch that's going to happen. We're going to post up a connection to that. So if you know a few good men, make sure that you tag them once we put it up. You can go to his page, his stuff. John, Mr. Biggs, what is your Instagram handle?
At Johnny Biggs 825.
At Johnny Biggs 825. You can
Jonathan go to Gant on Facebook.
And so you can go to his pages, and you'll see all of that stuff on his wall. And again, you'll see it at Encounter the Well as well. Please, if you know a few good men, tag them because they should be there. I'll be hosting. They have been gracious enough to allow me to host. I hope they know what they get into. But then there's Calvin Hawkins, councilman, will be speaking. John Carr, our sheriff, will be speaking. And there'll be a lot of folks in the room, a lot of powerful people in the room. So please come. Matt, Reverend Mama Dent, if y'all are free that day, love to see you in a place to be on February 25th, that Saturday, January 25th. This has been an exceptional well. And from the bottom of my heart, I love y'all. To our Wellians, Jawan, Butterfly, I love y'all. Thanks for joining us tonight. Susie, all the folks that were on. I know my grandmother was on. All the folks that were on, we love y'all. And again, want to shout out Brennan B, who put all this together, who continues to market us and strategize for us to make sure we have innovative and creative ways to reach y'all. He is the man. Y'all know how to find him. He's already part of the squad, baby. And we have so much more to come. Like us, follow us, subscribe. And we will be seeing y'all next week. It's going to be a dope conversation next week. So make sure you're following us. Love you guys, and nothing you can do about it. See you then.
Amen. Peace, bro.